Hi, I'm Jan Oder. I'm chatting today with Dave Simon, the General Manager of Growth Initiatives at Moloco. Dave is currently focused on developing a machine learning solution to enable streaming media companies to sell profitable marketing outcomes to performance marketers and to help marketers find profitable performance in CTV and OTT media environments. Dave is here to talk about a recent survey Moloco performed with YouGov and what the results tell both streaming platforms and publishers about the need for personalized ads. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So what does Moloco do?
Yes, a great question. So first and foremost, and I know this answer can elicit some funny responses for the marketing noise that's in our market, but the fact is Moloco is a machine learning company. It was started by a handful of machine learning engineers who were ex-Google, ex-Oracle, and the premise was that machine learning is incredibly powerful at making predictions about what consumers are going to do next. But the best machine learning has historically been locked up inside of the walled gardens like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. And so our objective was to democratize access to really high quality machine learning. It's been a 10-year journey. Moloco celebrated its 10th anniversary not that long ago. And so in order to make the machine learning make sense and prove that it worked, we had to pick a market to deploy it in. And the first market we deployed it in was the mobile app ecosystem. So if you are an advertiser that wants to drive profitable app installs and subsequent profitable events from those users that have installed your app, you hire Moloco as a DSP service to go out and find those consumers and optimize to those high LTV users that are being driven into your platform. And that was the first iteration. But over the last 2 years, Moloco has actually incubated its next two businesses on top of that same machine learning infrastructure. There's a concept that we talk a lot about called operational machine learning, which is really the marriage of market expertise and high quality machine learning. This is an obvious statement, but there are very specific nuances to different media environments, different types of users, different types of outcomes. And so what Moloco has invested very heavily in is machine learning that can drive prediction for outcomes in multiple media environments, but also do it in a way that's scalable, which makes it affordable for other advertisers who want to buy on the open internet. Those next two businesses we launched, the first one we launched was Moloco Commerce Media, which is an enterprise software platform designed for retail marketplaces to build their own version of Amazon ads. Mm-hmm. And so if you are StockX or if you are any of these really big marketplaces doing tons of volume, you operate at a very narrow margin. Ads is a very high margin business for you, but starting an ads business can be very expensive and complicated. And so many of the large marketplaces around the world have come to Moloco to stand up that ads platform. About a little over a year ago, we launched the Moloco streaming media platform. And the idea was that if you were a streaming company and you had a whole bunch of users and you either wanted to enter the ad-supported streaming space or you wanted to use a system that could help you make decisions about what ad to serve to what user with a lot higher confidence that the ad was going to be relevant for that individual viewer, we built an ad server that effectively does that. And so the Moloco streaming media platform is Moloco's take on an ad server that was built with this new outcome-led or more accountable media dollar dynamic in mind. And so we've been live with it for about a year. It's going phenomenally, and it's really, in my mind, it's probably one of the most exciting, groundbreaking pieces of technology that's come into the market really since the creation of the CTV app. And so we're very excited about it. We're seeing lots of momentum and traction from the market.
So the primary target customers are who, and can you share who any customers might be at this point?
Sure. So the primary customer are streaming services. And the one customer I can talk about openly is JioCinema, which is the largest streaming platform in India. They bought the streaming rights to the India Premier League, which is the second largest live sporting event in the world after the Tour de France. Actually, it might be the third. It's Tour de France, Olympics, and then IPL. For context, we saw about 250 million daily viewers. So it's about 2.5 times the size of the Super Bowl here in the U.S. And the objective is when you have a piece of content like IPL, which has a price tag in the billions, how do you make sure that you're broadcasting this in 12 different languages You have thousands of ad campaigns running. You have different parts of different geos across India, all of them tuning into various events. How do you make sure you're serving the right ad that gets the advertiser the most bang for the buck? And so when GeoCinema stood this up, they really sort of took this new approach to if we were to start an ad server from scratch today, what would it look like? And lo and behold, a lot of what they were talking about aligned very tightly to our vision for how ad serving could be improved. And so we partnered with them last year for their first streaming of the IPL. We just completed the second streaming about 2 weeks ago. And again, record-breaking viewership. I think it's now the largest live stream event ever. And so in that moment, we've had to use very heavy machine learning to manage that volume of complexity that goes into those kinds of campaigns and that kind of content.
India is a tough market. So if you can do it,
fascinating market.
Yeah, it really is. So tell us about the survey and what were the key insights you want to share with us today?
Yeah, I think one of the hallmarks of Moloco is that because we are such a machine learning driven company, we need data. And so the objective with YouGov was to try and get hard data on how consumers think about their experience in streaming. Now, some of this stuff is going to be fairly obvious to any consumer, but the fact is that when you look at how most media companies are managing this transition from linear, which was driven by cable fees and by large ad-sponsored events, to this now live stream or even VOD streamed event, you have this moment of opportunity where you and I don't need to see the same ad. That's not the case when you watch any Thursday night football game or any of us go into any sort of, like if you go to put on Yellowstone on Paramount, you and I live in different parts of the country. We have different interests. We should all be getting different ads that are customized to us. And the fact is that technology, that opportunity exists, but the technology to select the right ad is actually very different from how the legacy ad servers really operate. And so our objective was to try and understand what those consumer trends were, to make sure that as we put our operational element into this operational machine learning effort that we've been making, that we're thinking about consumers the right way, that we're showing data for how consumer activity can drive success or failure of streaming platforms, and really sort of give our customers the confidence that this is the right path to go down.
So the survey and the results you want to share.
Sure. So the biggest thing that stood out to me was how many consumers will fire you as a streaming service for bad ads. I think for years, I don't think this is the case anymore, but for years, one of the things you heard about Hulu was that you'd see the same ad 7 or 8 times in a single 30-minute episode. That causes churn. That's a very real risk. And it's not just the diversity of demand. Lord knows that Hulu has access to thousands and thousands of advertisers. So if they have access to all these different brands, why is it that they're serving one over and over? And what does that mean for them as a streaming service? And so that was one of the most important takeaways, that diversity of demand, and more importantly, accuracy of the prediction or accuracy of the targeting can actually enhance the experience. And so that was one of the most important things that we took away, that it is in fact a perfect purpose-built use case for machine learning to make selections about what ads are served.
And I guess it's no surprise with all the fast channels popping up, you also found that a lot of people were willing to trade advertisements for a lower cost on the subscription service.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, I think at this point, it's a well understood data point, but the fact is, it's always good to talk about it. And more importantly, I think one of the things, because we focus so heavily on India with the India Premier League cricket tournament, regional differences in consumer behavior can vary widely. But the fact is that people are willing to not pay for streaming services if they can watch ads. And that's true if you're talking about the US or India, both of which are, two of the most lucrative and large markets in the world to be focused on.
Okay, so one of the findings was that 57% of consumers prefer personalized ads. How does your service leverage first-party data to enhance ad personalization?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me start with a little bit about how the structure of ad serving is done today. And I'll actually use Google as the example with YouTube, because Google is also one of the largest ad servers with the Google Ad Manager, the GAM product. When you look at how any one of us tunes into the Today Show, almost always the first ad you're going to see is for a pharmaceutical drug. Now, a lot of these drugs are solving afflictions that may only impact 1 to 5% of Americans. But these pharmaceutical marketers are still buying the largest broad reach shows like Today's Show, like The Morning, all these things. And so the question is like, why are they willing to build into their media buy 99 to 95% waste? And the answer is because they have really high margins on their products. So what they'll do is they'll just pay the highest price. Ad servers make choices about what ad to serve based on who is willing to pay the highest price at the point where you negotiate the deal, when you negotiate the contract. The fact is that there are so many more marketers that would gain value from advertising to me or you other than that pharmaceutical brand. But because the price is the only determining factor that an ad server has in making a selection about what ad to serve, there's no opportunity for the advertisers to actually like choose who the audience is and have those systems operate. And so think about it on YouTube. YouTube is just got announced today. They're now 9% of all streaming attention. They don't use Google Ad Manager. They don't use the ad server they own. Why is that? Because they know that they want to generate a prediction of a likelihood of an ad generating an outcome that the advertiser cares about. And they'll use the budget and the price of the outcome, not a CPM. That's a huge dynamic shift in the market. And the only way you can understand the outcome is by working with advertisers to have them tell you what outcomes they care about and how much they're worth to you. So one of the most important things that we've done is we've invested a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources in giving advertisers a way of informing our machine learning what kind of outcomes, what kind of users generate profitable outcomes for them. And so the best example I can give you is I'm less interested in understanding who Auto Trader says is in market for a car. I'm more interested in knowing from Ford's CRM system who bought a car 3 years ago. What do we know about that user? The Auto Trader data is helpful, for sure. It's a phenomenal way to predict who might be in market, but it might not tell you exactly what is unique about somebody who buys an F-150 as opposed to a Chevy Silverado. Really, the data that can tell you that lives behind the walls of the marketers. And so having them share that information with us in a way that it can be leveraged in a machine learning prediction, that's the difference between the legacy ad serving systems and what we've spent the last year building.
Okay. So when I install your system or when I adopt your system, I mean, I'm a streaming publisher. So what kind of connection do the publishers have with their advertisers to get this kind of data into your system?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Moloco and then I'll talk about the industry broadly because there are some really incredibly exciting things that the big streamers are doing that also will help accelerate this use case for machine learning. The first is that we've built integrations with most of the endpoint systems that marketers use to store their outcome data. So if you think about Nike, Nike has 2 apps, they have 1 billion stores, and they have a website, all of which drive transactions. And the question is, how can that data, every single time someone walks into a store and purchases something, that winds up as a record in some CRM or an AWS or GCP or something. How can we unlock that data in a structured way so that it comes over to us? Same thing about the app, right? Nike has app promo campaigns that they run all the time. They want to understand not just who installed the app, but then what sort of purchase volume is expected through that. And there are a whole bunch of services that Nike and other marketers use to share that data with their buying platforms like Moloco. And so because we built this infrastructure, when we go into a publisher, streaming publisher, and deploy this system, those connectivity points to the outcome data that matters are built into the platform already. And then it's just a matter of permissioning. So if you have certain sponsors that want to buy from you, they can activate their data to be made available to this use case where streaming media can now understand what the impact was for some of the ad campaigns that they ran.
Okay. Could you go a little bit deeper into the outcome-based marketing? I understand the difference between impressions and outcomes, but what type of outcomes are people specifically trying to ascertain and collect?
Yeah, this is what spells the future of Moloco, the future runway of our market. Outcomes historically have been equivalent to bottom funnel metrics. I want to get someone to, like, if you take FanDuel or DraftKings or DoorDash or Uber, DraftKings has a KPI of you get the app installed, then I want to see what the initial deposit volume is. It might be $30, it might be $100. But that's only one KPI that typically happens within a week of download. What's really interesting is if you look at that activity of that user over a 6-month period, do they fly through their first $100 deposit in a week? Do they never redeposit? And so as you start to, as a marketer, as you start to see those individual data points and you pass those things back to machine learning systems like Moloco or like Facebook or YouTube or Amazon, what you wind up with is the ability of the machine to learn why these high LTV users do what they do. Where do they reside on the internet? How much does it cost to access those users? What is the time of day impact? How does it impact the likelihood of those hardcore outcomes that are really ROAS driven? That's sort of like the legacy way of doing it. But if you look at all of the news that came out of that's coming out of the upfronts this year, if you look at all the announcements that all the big media companies made at CES, and if you look at the topic of conversation in CAM this year, it was all about outcomes. But outcomes does not have to mean bottom funnel. It can mean anything that drives impact for you. So for example, if you're Ford and you're launching a new car, you don't expect to sell the car because it might not be available yet. So that the transaction of purchasing the car might not be the right KPI. But Ford has really good data science internally to understand if I can drive this much viewership of these features of this new car that we're launching, and I can run brand lift surveys to understand how much am I impacting people's awareness that Ford now has a whole line of electric cars, that's an outcome. And that can be fed into a machine learning system to drive adoption and to drive increase on that KPI. And so when we talk about outcomes, it's not just like this bottom funnel stuff that historically is where outcomes have lived. It's actually the full funnel of marketing objectives. There's a big telco that is very concerned that they have a brand reputation problem. Their KPI is not new cell phone plans sold. Their KPI is, are people responding to surveys about us favorably? And so that's an outcome that can be optimized to.
Okay. How are publishers handling these functions today? Are they just not getting this data before they make advertising decisions? I mean, is anybody not using a system like this?
Yeah, so very few people are using systems like this. If you look at the average streamer, the number of ad operations people that live inside their orgs is usually very large. Those people are tasked with, I have a campaign, it's running across 10 properties I have. The KPI they want is X, and I'm 10% below it. Let me look at the properties I have, maybe cut off the 2 that are performing the worst, and then optimize to those 8 KPIs. And for the record, like, this is what I was doing 10 years ago at one of the first DSPs. I was quite manually pulling a report, looking at the CPA across every property we bought, and then striking or blocking certain properties. And that's fine. That's the way media buying has been done for years. But there's an opportunity to look to the future and say, how do we automate that? And not just like, I want to block certain publishers or certain properties, but really, what are the full set of attributes that are available that we could optimize to? The fact is that if you look at Moloco's machine learning system, we talk about weighting and we talk about features. A feature is an element within the algorithm, within the equation, that tells us like, oh, if you see this happen, or if you see it coming from this property, we're going to weight that feature very highly because we know that's correlated with historical features. We do that prediction millions of times per second with hundreds of thousands of data points. There is no human on planet Earth. Bobby Fischer could not have done what our algorithms are doing. And so it's this new way of thinking about optimizing media that really leverages this new innovation around operational machine learning.
So we've talked about several benefits of your system. It seems like automating and simplifying campaign management's got to be a big one.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to go back to the IPL example, like I said, I think it was, it was several hundred advertisers running across 12 languages in different geos with multiple games going on at the same time. If you are a mobile payment advertiser, which is a very big business in India, you really care about getting people to download the app, sign up for it, and connect their banking information to that system. How are you supposed to optimize that with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of variables in real time? It's just simply not possible. And so that's where machine learning can really provide tremendous value.
Did the Indian company have any before or after results they could track in terms of what they delivered to their advertisers with your system?
So the IPL and GeoCinema are a relatively new streaming service with this kind of offering. So the short answer is no. But we have other tests with some US based streamers where we'll look at a campaign, let's say for a retailer, and they'll say the retailer has an objective of getting website conversions, website sales to happen, and typically our ML is somewhere between 4 and 7x more efficient at hitting that KPI. Monetarily, what that means is we can use up to 7 times fewer impressions to achieve the same objective, which as a streamer is like gold, because now you're sitting on 7 times more impressions you can monetize with different types of demand. And so, if it takes you 10,000 impressions to get an outcome that you care about for a particular user or a particular advertiser, and you can make that 3,000 impressions now, there's a huge lift because now you've got this incremental new supply you can go out and monetize with a new type of advertiser.
So if I'm a streaming service who is your actual customer, how long does it take to get this implemented? And when do I start to see results?
Yeah, look, this is not a highly transactional product. This is enterprise software. And so there is a process of onboarding, just like any other ad server, that takes a few months. It's an investment. But the fact is that machine learning training is one big part of it, and I'll talk about that in a second. The biggest piece is, how do you figure out how to integrate this into your existing systems? How do you integrate this into your forecasting, your order management, your CDN and encoding? All of those kinds of things become really critical to make this successful. But that's blocking and tackling. There's nothing, there's no brain surgery required for that. The brain surgery really lives on the machine learning training side. And that's why Moloco invests so heavily in engineering talent. At last count, I think we had over 100 PhDs working at the company who are all, PhDs in machine learning and data science, because getting operational machine learning to go from, I have a good model that scores really well on some generic index, to, I need to make sure that this advertiser is seeing profitable results. There's work required and it's ongoing. And so that's part of what we offer with this service is we will help you figure out what are the right data flows, what are the right inputs from the advertiser, how can your own data about your audience while it's being streamed, how can that help inform some of these ML predictions? And so all of that, that's really where the ongoing work happens. And so for the services other than GeoCinema, who's already been live for a year, it takes 3 to 6 months to get this thing to work. But at the end, what you're winding up with is significantly more free inventory because you're not chewing through impressions. Also, higher yield because you're able to deliver better outcomes at the same price, which means lower impressions. And so there's more revenue for less impressions. And the third thing is you're talking about something in market that gives you access to dollars that traditionally do not go to streamers. Why is it that YouTube has grown so fast? They are the same size as the CTV market. It's because you put $1 into YouTube and you get $1.30 of results out. And our objective is to turn every streamer give them the ability to do the same thing.
What's if I'm an advertiser in one of those systems that you're supplying to, what's my ramp up time in order to get fully integrated into the new system?
Yeah, so this is the cool part. This is the challenge, and this is also the opportunity. In the mobile app space, which is where Moloco, has spent most of the time we're working on, it's very common for an advertiser to work with a mobile measurement partner, an MMP. And those MMPs capture the install. They attribute that install to the appropriate vendor based on the rules that the advertiser has set up. And then they also have post-install revenue events that inform those systems. Not only did you get me an install, but you also got me revenue further down the line. I'll give you a fun example from a couple of years ago. There are a whole host of solitaire apps. When the solitaire apps get installed on the phone, typically they make more than 50% of their revenue in year 2. Imagine if you're an advertiser and you're stopping the amount of data you send to your ML systems that are optimizing at 30 days. You miss 23 months worth of revenue events that could help inform the ML how this is going to work, how to accurately hit these people with the right message in the right moment. And so most of the more sophisticated app developers have actually set up systems where they pass this information over time. The hardest thing that we found so far is that most of the big traditional brands have not yet architected their systems to capture, I have an event that occurred, I now want to share that out with somebody else. And there's a reticence to do that. It's privacy concerns, it's competitive concerns. But the fact is that this is an arms race. You live in a bidded competitive market, and you have a data advantage that lives behind your walls. And so there's all the incentive in the world to try and unlock that and navigate it in a consumer privacy friendly way, but really give these ML systems the opportunity to optimize. And so that's been one of the harder things. Typically what happens is an advertiser will share with us 6 weeks worth of installs from all their other partners. And they'll anonymize it in terms of who delivered what. But then we get to look at that data and say, okay, these are the commonalities among all of these people who installed this app or who drove this event or who became profitable from an LTV to CAC ratio. How can we learn from that? And so really, there's about a 2-week learning period. Once you've unlocked your data, if you can give us, 4 to 6 weeks worth of data, and you can be up and running pretty quickly. But we won't go live with an advertiser until we have that, because starting with a cold start means we're just going to be wasting your money. And, our whole idea of creating long-term, durable relationships with brands that are trying to drive growth, we don't want to do that. And so that's one of the things we're very cautious about.
So are streaming service providers going to enable some customers to use Moloco and others won't? You see that being like a hybrid system once it's installed?
Well, listen, I hope all of them use us. But the fact is, yeah, I think there are certain streamers that have a much better understanding of the data infrastructure of their advertising customers. One of the first ones that jumps to mind is NBC. The NBC team has done an unbelievably good job of creating clean room setups and accessing first-party data from advertisers via AWS. And so now what's interesting is that's a phenomenal start. But the use case that most streamers are winding up doing is they're just building better segmentation. They're not actually optimizing. So what that means is they're creating cohorts. When a bid request comes in, it has a user ID and some other attributes, usually 10 or 12 attributes about that particular impression. What app is it streaming from? Sometimes they'll pass genre. Sometimes they'll pass IP address. Sometimes they'll pass, is this a 15-second spot or a 30-second spot, right? They'll pass information in the bid request. What happens today for most ad servers is they look at that bid request, they look up the user who's generating that bid request, and they say, does this user fall into a segment of auto intenders? If yes, then bid on behalf of Ford. That's very different than saying, is this the right time of day? What other information do we know about this user on their profile? What is the likelihood of this person actually responding positively to this? Have we served them ads before, and did they not work, right? Some people don't respond to ads. You can do top of funnel messaging there, but getting an outcome from that person is probably not a good idea. And so that is the big difference really between the three biggest players in our industry who have eaten up 75% of all ad dollars that have come in, and the rest of the broader ecosystem, is that they make real-time decisions. They are not using binary yes-no decisions based on a cohort that was assembled. And it doesn't matter if you update that cohort once a day. The fact is that it's all about audience data. There are other data points. Like if someone served me an ad right now on Wall Street Journal, which is up on my desktop, I'm not paying any attention. It's not a good time to serve me an ad. I will not respond positively to that ad. There are data points in our ecosystem that inform machine learning systems. That's what's happening. And so giving streamers the ability to leverage the full set of data that exists rather than just these audience-based cohorts, that's the big nuance that's coming together. And that's what we think there's real performance potential.
So capture all this in terms of general trends. We're going from what to what, and where is Moloco playing in that space?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, and look, I don't mean to say people have been doing this wrong. I look at this as the next iteration. This is complicated stuff. We're talking about reshaping a $100 to $150 billion market that has been operating efficiently for 50, 60 years in form of linear TV. I think the first thing that streamers have had to focus on is, how do I get back consumer attention when everyone cut the cord? And they were doing it in an environment where you had some very, very large entrenched platforms like Netflix and YouTube. And so the streamers are now saying, like, I got to get the content to the consumer and get their attention. And now that advertising has become a proven model, as we've shown in the survey, and as everyone else sort of assumes based on the investment that all the streamers are making, there's an opportunity to go from TV being a mass reach product to TV being an outcome driving product. And that's the transition that's happening. But in order to do that, you're talking about thousands, if not millions of advertisers with tens of millions of viewers at any given time. You really need a machine to manage that optimization for you. And so, if you look at, like, when you watch a linear broadcast of the NFL, at the first commercial break, every single person sees the same ad. There's an opportunity to make that more efficient. And that results in better experience for the user and better yield for the streamer.
Okay. Any final thoughts or advice to our listeners on how to navigate these challenges?
The one thing I would say is that advertising is going from, this is true for both the streamer and for the advertiser. Advertising used to be about deep research to understand who exactly buys your product and then turn that into an audience, which then you ship into, or you buy you buy content as a proxy for that audience. That's the art of it, right? Show picking used to be one of the most interesting ways to try and drive marketing outcomes. It's not about that anymore. It's about data infrastructure. It's about data orchestration. And so the most important thing that streamers can do is make sure that when an advertiser has a data set that they deem valuable, they're in a position to take it in and use it in a unique way that can help drive outcomes. And that's the most important transition that we have to go through.
So is it going to increase or decrease the price of Super Bowl ads?
I think it's going to increase it because it turns out everyone pays a lot of attention to Super Bowl ads. I think a lot of quote unquote linear ads are dramatically undervalued relative to other impressions. But that's only true when you can create a true bidded environment where market pricing will be determined by the demand density. And look, let's not get this wrong. Most of the big streamers are doing this today, but they're doing it with the same old school KPIs of reach and frequency. If they move beyond that and get to something more closely tied to, this is an event that has revenue profitable event for an advertiser, that's where the opportunity lives. And so we're really excited. This is something that we see a lot of momentum with. We have most of the big streamers in the world in conversation at some point, and so we're incredibly excited. It's been a great year for us in this business.
Okay, company name, product name, website.
Yeah, the company name is Moloco. The website is Moloco.com, and the product name is Moloco Streaming Media.
Listen, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.